Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live Sunday morning using Zoom, and welcome to those of you who are watching the recording of this service later on Chalice's YouTube channel. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that you have a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service. You can click on it to hide the subtitle or to show subtitle, depending on whether or not you want that function on or off. You are in control of that. Also on your menu is the chat button. For those of you who like to use the chat during the service, which many of us do, and you're welcome to do, please be sure that when you post that you use that little blue drop-down menu to select panelists and attendees. If you only post to panelists, it only comes to me, and you might be tempted to do that during this service, but the chat also scrolls by. So I have a time in the service for you to ask questions, and you should have on your menu this morning a Q&A button, and that's what we'll use to ask questions during the service. Yeah, so if you were, as I mentioned, if you only post to panelists, that message only comes to me. But a lot's going on during the service, and more importantly, the chat scrolls by, so I might miss a comment or question that comes that way. So let's all give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome. If you are with other people, if it's okay with them, give them a hug. So also finally this morning, I want to welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice. So towards the end of the service, I will put a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. Our weekly email is the best way to get information about our other groups and activities we offer besides Sunday worship. Most of our events and activities are still happening using Zoom. And so the email is where you get that Zoom information. So once you're on our email list, then you get information. You'll also get information about our monthly gathering for newcomers. So let's take a breath together.
Good morning. According to the Library of Congress, the first permanent Euro-American settlements began a pattern of displacement and land appropriation of indigenous people that continued until the 20th century. In this region that we consider home, the Kumeyaay first lived here for over 10,000 years and were the people who greeted the Spanish when they first sailed into the San Diego harbor in 1542. With this awareness, we acknowledge that Chalice is located on the stolen, tribal, ancestral homeland of the Apai, which is part of the Kumeyaay Nation, and the Payamkawichem Nation. This acknowledgement reminds us that we live in a history-driven present and that we need to be intentional with this land and with the people indigenous to the land. Mary Lyons from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe states, "When we, the indigenous people, talk about land, land is part of who we are. It is a mixture of our blood, our past, our current, and our future." According to the research done with Reclaiming Native Truth, 40% of Americans do not believe that indigenous people still exist in the U.S. Chalice hopes that with our first step of land acknowledgement, we can move towards educating ourselves and others about indigenous communities and their rich and diverse culture and create a meaningful relationship with them as well.
Now we light our chalice the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. When I light our chalice, I think of the many places our particular chalice has been the past few years. Under construction, we worshiped in a synagogue, we've worshiped at a park. It's obviously made it here to my home. So yeah, our chalice flame burns brightly in many different places that all who are seeking may find us. Our service this morning is a time to celebrate our tradition of questioning, so central to who we are as Unitarian Universalists. I often say we are the people more comfortable with questions than with answers. So as we look to the future in our country, the ability to ask questions, to stay curious, is one of the keys to envisioning a new and better future together. There will be a time later in the service, where instead of a sermon, I'm going to be answering questions that you ask. And as I mentioned earlier, I want you to use the Q&A function for that. I'm telling you this now in case you have come to the service with a question and you want to put that somewhere. You can put it in the Q&A already, and it will just be waiting for me when that time comes. And I prefer we use that than the chat because it's easier for me to keep track of the questions. Please keep in mind that I think then that everyone is able to see the questions and who asked them. So if you were wanting some anonymity, I don't think that's possible. But I invite you to ask your question. People ask me all kinds of things, and yeah, and I'm excited to see your questions this morning. Our call to worship. What brought you here this morning? What mystery? What magic? What song is your heart singing this morning? A song of joy, a song of sorrow? What will it take to open your heart to this moment? Will you lay down your burden this hour? Will you let yourself rest and be present? Come, let us worship together. And you're invited to join in singing. Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by honoring and sharing our joys and sorrows. If you would like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. These won't be spoken out loud, so these stay private to the Zoom gathering. If you'd like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, or if you'd like to send me a prayer request, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat box. Our story is called Owlie, written by Mike Thaler and illustrated by David Weisner. Owlie started asking questions when he was 2 years old. He would sit all night with his mother under the stars. "How many stars are in the sky?" he asked one night. "Many," answered his mother. "How many?" asked Owlie, looking up. His mother smiled. "Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. 101, 102, 103, 104. Owlie was still counting when the sun came up. 1001, 1002. "How many stars are in the sky?" asked his mother. "More than I can count," said Owlie, blinking. And he tucked his head under his wing and went to sleep. The next night, Owlie looked up at the sky again. "How high is the sky?" he asked his mother. "Very high," she said, looking up. "How high?" asked Owlie. "Go and see," said his mother. So Owlie flew up into the sky. He flew high above his tree. He flew to the clouds. He flapped his wings very hard. He flew above the clouds. But as high as he could fly, the sky was always higher. In the morning, when he landed on the tree, he was very tired. "How high is the sky?" asked his mother. "Higher than I can fly," said Owlie, closing his eyes and falling asleep. The next night, Owlie heard the sound of waves in the ocean. "How many waves are there in the ocean?" he asked his mother. "Many waves," she answered. "How many?" asked Owlie. "Go and count them," she replied. So Owlie flew to the shore. He stood on the beach and counted the waves. 1, 2, 3, 4. But as many as he could count, many more followed. 1001, 1002. And when the sun came up, he saw that there was still an ocean full of waves. So, sleepily, he returned to his mother. "How many waves are in the ocean?" she asked. "More than I can count," answered Owlie, closing his eyes. The next night, Owlie asked his mother, "How deep is the ocean?" "Very deep," she answered. "How deep?" asked Owlie. His mother looked at the sky. "Almost as deep as the sky is high," she said. Owlie looked up. He sat there all night thinking about the sky and the stars and the waves and the ocean and all he had learned from his mother. And as the sun came up, he turned to her and said, "I love you." "How much?" asked his mother. "Very much," answered Owlie. "How much?" she asked. Owlie thought for a minute and then gave her a hug. "I love you as much as the sky is high and the ocean is deep." She put her wing around him and gave him a hug. "Do you have any more hugs to give me?" asked Owlie. "Many more." His mother hugged him again. "How many more?" asked Owlie, falling asleep. "As many as there are waves in the ocean and stars in the sky." And she did. So as I've mentioned previously, this Sunday, instead of preaching a sermon, I invite your questions sort of live in real time here, and I'll answer the best that I can. We almost do this annually. We didn't have a question service last year. I think, I didn't have any answers for anything that was happening in 2020. So we didn't do that. And when we had this service in 2019, we were in between. We were just about to come back to our campus after construction, but it wasn't quite ready yet. And so actually we did a question service online. This was our first online service, was in 2019, and we didn't know it at the time, but it was actually good preparation for when the pandemic came. And you all didn't have a lot of questions in 2019 because I think we were mostly experimenting and enjoying the technology of Zoom. So it's been a few years since we've had a meaty question service, and you may not have a lot of questions today. I know we're traumatized and worn out, but I do hope, I always worry that there's not going to be, no one will have anything to ask. So if there is anything that's crossed your mind, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Even if you think it's too big a question, I do get sermon ideas from this time together. You know, I'll be the first to say if something's too much for a quick answer. And I also want to name that I have what I call pandemic brain, and or mush brain also, depending on my mood. I know lots of you do too. And so sometimes like simple nouns escape me. And so I'm certainly not as sharp as I have been in other times in my life, but I know you forgive me for that. And if anyone is having trouble using the Q&A for any reason, I don't know what it's like on your end, you could put your question in the chat, and then maybe someone else who's comfortable using Q&A could copy and paste it for you. So help each other if you're having any challenges with that. So I'll start with the questions that are here. So the first one is, can you talk about the expression ashe? Which may be spelled incorrectly. I think it is sometimes spelled that way. It's also spelled A-S-E. Where does it come from? Its literal meaning and what you use mean when they use it. My guess is that you've heard it in like a litany that goes like, blessed be, amen, ashe, and maybe even a couple of more things. So it's sort of said with those amen words. So to be honest, when I saw this question pop up, I Googled it. I thought it was Native American, and I'm glad I took a moment just to look it up. Its origins are Yoruba, so it's meant to acknowledge African, and I'm sure African American expression. I don't know a lot more about it than that. I'd have to research. You know, we're in this interesting, rich time as Unitarian Universalists, when African Americans in our movement are speaking up as a community to make requests about inclusion in Unitarian Universalist tradition. So I'm sure there are people who want to hear ashe in a litany of like sort of amen language, I'd call it. And I'm sure we have other congregants and other Unitarian Universalists who want our predominantly white denomination to be cautious about using that. So yeah, that's probably all I can say about it responsibly. I tend to stick with blessed be and amen because those are the traditions I'm most familiar with, Christianity and paganism. And if I were to use a longer litany, I'd want to, you know, be more confident in proper how to use things. I'm sure African American Unitarian Universalists don't want a worship service full of hymns and readings from white people and then to throw in an ashe at the end. So I would say that's probably how not to use it, and have more learning to do about how to use it well and properly. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah, so, okay. I think I answered that to the best of my ability. What's the difference between a Unitarian and a Universalist, and why is it necessary to use both names? Unitarianism and Universalism were two separate faith traditions, and with their own origins in the United States and their own development. When they were far enough along in the 1800s to, you know, really be denominations, they had a lot in common. And so preachers, Unitarian preachers, were often invited to speak at Universalist congregations and vice versa. And, some preachers considered themselves Unitarian and Universalist. The differences between those traditions, I know that theologians could talk more deeply about the theological differences, but in terms of what, I don't know, one of my understanding and thinking, and a lot of understanding and thinking, is that the differences in the denominations were predominantly cultural. And so Unitarians get summarized as more of the head people, lots of education and a little more buttoned up, a little more formal in terms of religious practice. And the Universalists get described as more working class, more open, what's the right word? I would say outgoing. Yeah, the heart, that's how it gets noted, the head and the heart. Theologically, it's easy to, I was just reading about this in a ministers group yesterday. It's easy to summarize Unitarianism, and I tend to do this, as the belief, the rejection of a Trinitarian God, Father, Son, and Spirit, in preference of a unity, that God is one. But the theology is deeper than that the real change was in thinking that humans have the spark of the divine in us, and that we are capable of being more than sinners, of aspiring to follow Jesus' teachings in a rich, deep way. Universalism, theologically, is the idea that there is no hell, that everyone is saved. And so if you think about those for a minute, you can start to see the theological overlap. If we're, that we're not destined for hell, and in fact, we have the spark of the divine in us, there's a lot of common ground there. So this does create, when we merged, to honor both traditions, and I'm sure there was squabbling over whether we were Universalist Unitarians, and you will meet people who describe themselves as Universalist Unitarians, and we have some congregations that in their name, they are Universalist Unitarian congregations. But we kept them both in recognition of those two traditions, and the result is a name that people outside of our faith, can't remember and don't understand. I kind of think that that's okay. I feel like, when you have the heart for trying to understand Unitarian Universalism, then maybe this is the place for you. And if the name is just too long, maybe this isn't the place for you. So yes, we've always been terrible at marketing, and maybe we always will be. So yeah, I hope that's some kind of helpful. Is this the wrong church for me if I believe in the divinity of Christ? No. If you're looking for a lot of people who share that specific belief and want a lot of a lot more talk about the divinity of Jesus, then there are other churches to look for, and I'm happy to help point you towards our liberal Christian friends. You'll hear in our sermons, I know this is your second visit, the person who's asking, I don't reference scripture in particular very frequently. And it's not that that's not a valid source of teaching. It's just for Unitarian Universalists, we find inspiration and teaching everywhere. So in all faith traditions, in our personal experience, in nature. So yeah, when we've had people come into community who really want to talk about their specific belief system and be with people who share that specific belief system, that's when Unitarian Universalism doesn't always feel comfortable, because we don't actually talk about that a lot. If you come to social hour, which I hope you'll do after the service, we don't tend to be talking about scripture or religious text. We tend to be making other kinds of conversation. So yeah, but folks of all different faith traditions are welcome here. And yeah, I find myself picturing the social hour on the courtyard, which is of course not available to us quite yet. hopefully soon. And if you're in a conversation you're not enjoying, you can just, keep moving and look for a different group. But like, for example, we don't have a Bible study class at Chalice UU. And, a lot of people are looking for that kind of in-depth work in a faith tradition. And so that's not something we offer. So I hope that's helpful. And I'm happy to talk with you about that more. Again, for people who are new to the congregation, when you sign up for our email list, you'll get an email about our newcomer gathering. And our next one is actually next Sunday. And that's a time that we could talk about that question more deeply as well. So I hope that's helpful. How do I think Unitarian Universalism and Chalice in particular will come out of the post-Trump, post-pandemic era? Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm really in touch with right now with our feeling of being traumatized. And I know I don't expect that you all are in your homes thinking, oh my gosh, I'm traumatized. But for example, yesterday I realized we had a worship associates meeting, and in just chatting about stuff, I said out loud, like, we have a Facebook group for sharing and caring. And I said, like, no one's posted in there. Like, of course, during the pandemic, there were lots of posts, but it's really just sort of like, that group is kind of, really quieted. And I don't think it's because we don't have joys and sorrows and things to share. I think it's that as we feel safer, and when we feel safer is when we begin to process our feelings. And so many times in my office, someone will say, like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way right now. And I always lift up, like, you probably feel safe enough, like your life feels stable enough that you can now, some older memories come up to be dealt with, because you have the resiliency to face it then. So it's hard for me to see very far ahead. I think the next year in particular is really going to be just sort of holding each other, try to get our feet back under us. And that, the challenge of church life, this is on my heart a lot right now, and it's so practical. I know it's not where we are, but I'm really thinking, like, how are we going to have enough volunteers to do the things we need to do when we're all feeling sort of stunned and worn out? Like, I don't think a lot of folks are, excited to raise a hand for ongoing volunteer work. And yet that's what it takes to make the church run. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're, in the big picture, we're going to come out fine. We have a healthy community, even during this pandemic, how we came together to be here for each other, to keep our kind of essential, most supportive groups functioning and reaching out to each other. I know that we're eager to be back together when we can do that safely. So I think we're a very healthy community, and that we're going to come out of this well. And in particular, because I know there's always sort of a wondering about growth and new people. We've had a lot of people visit us online during the pandemic, and many people who, I get a little Zoom list of who attended. So many people who attended but never signed up for the email list, either because they weren't interested, but also possibly because they thought, like, I'm interested in this church and I'll check it out once it's back to in person. I wouldn't be surprised if we have like a real wave of visitors once we're back in person together. And, then it's, our work to be warm and welcoming, and to try and welcome people into church life. And we need to do that at a time that we're feeling kind of traumatized and worn out. So yeah, that's my best answer to that. And the other thing about, the post-Trump era, there is still so much work to be done, and so many things happening around voter rights. And, I can feel us all sort of breathing this sigh of relief about political issues. And yet, we can't rest for too long, and we can't look away for too long. There's still so much to be done. Fascism still exists in our country. The white supremacy still exists. And, we need to face those and figure out how to respond to them, and, how to fight for social justice. Okay, now there's a lot of questions. What's the most significant thing you've learned or gained from the pandemic, or else what have you heard from congregants? one of the most significant things I learned, and I mentioned this at times probably last fall, is not to wait to celebrate. Um, we kept pushing back celebrating the hub, the opening of our new building in 2019. So we thought, well, let's wait until it's furnished, and then let's wait until we put the playground in. And we waited so long, and then the pandemic came, and we weren't able to celebrate the hub in person, but we decided, let's not keep making that mistake. And we dedicated the hub as part of our 20-year anniversary, which we held online. So that's going to stay with me for a long time. Don't wait to thank people. Don't wait to throw a party. Don't wait to celebrate any good thing. You never know when you're going to turn the corner and it's going to be rough days. So celebrate what you can when you can. And what I'm hearing from congregants now, we're not through it yet, but we definitely, pre-pandemic, many of us, maybe most of us, had really overscheduled lives. And the pandemic was a rough way to step back from that. But of course we did. And now as things are opening back up and meetings are resuming, I'm really hearing a lot of you questioning, like, I'm not sure I want to do all this. And even, I love my friends, but I'm not sure I need this many social occasions. And so we're at a moment of like, did we learn something, or are we just going to go back to what we were doing before? And I think certainly, I will have some sermons about this in the next few months. It's an important time to really think about priorities and both what nourishes us and what's important in our lives, because we do, I hope church is an important place in people's lives. And I think doing social justice work is an important and necessary place. And we have to make room for those things. If we don't make room for those things, then, the church won't exist and our social justice work will fail. So, finding the right mix of things, and the right mix of things that reflects priorities, not just what feels good or what fits in the moment. That will be a great sermon topic. Do I know if we will have snacks after services once services resume at Chalice? I don't know that. I was just talking yesterday. It's hard for me to even think that far ahead, because probably the next step in terms of getting back is to start to have, I haven't said this to like anybody besides our music director, but we need to start thinking about, can me and the music director and the worship associate be in the chapel on Sunday morning instead of in here? That's probably the next step. Not having people attend in the chapel, but we need to start to figure out the technology. So I don't know. But certainly we have people who will figure that out. If we do have snacks, it would probably be individually packaged snacks. That's what we were talking about like in the couple of days before the pandemic shut everything down, and we thought we were still meeting in person on Sunday. So there might be some stepped things, but yeah, certainly we don't want to have things on a shared plate, I don't think. So anyway, smarter people than me will figure that out for sure. Okay, so I never thought I'd be a contemptuous person. I'm just going to read it. But the Trump influence has changed that. Now that I'm watching Trump parents make the volitional choice not to protect their children in favor of their political narrative, can I really look at this any other way? Yeah, I figured there'd be a question like this. So hugs, right? This isn't how we want to think of people. And I think there's like an overlay. I figured there might be a question about unvaccinated people, because I know a lot of you are struggling with, how do we feel compassion and respect for the inherent worth and dignity of other people who we feel are threatening our lives at some way, right? Like if we were, more of us were vaccinated, we'd have herd immunity and we'd be safer. And so it is hard not to feel mean towards people who are choosing not to vaccinate themselves. And this fighting over children and the schools and masking and all of these things. So I want to say, I share every mean thought anyone has ever had, for sure, right? We're tired. We're still scared. There's still things to be scared of. everything isn't back the way it was, and we wish it could be. And we wish it could be faster, for sure. When I really ground and center myself, I do have a lot of compassion. It's easy to see someone like Ted Cruz, who to me really seems like he is out spreading evil, doing things that are harmful to people on a mass scale. But, you know, most people aren't aren't evil ringleaders. They're ordinary people who are scared and whose fears are being preyed upon, and not just their fears of the coronavirus, but their fears about everything, jobs, jobs, especially the future of their families. So I feel like this will be a controversial thing to say, but many of the things that are said about the vaccines that those of us who are in favor of the vaccines just sort of instinctively want to push away, many of those things are true. It's true that the vaccines were rushed through approval and that they have conditional approval. It's true that there can be terrible side effects from the vaccines for a small minority of people, we know. It's true that you can be fully vaccinated and still get coronavirus. All of those things are true. And for most of us, we are highly vaccinated. We've surveyed the congregation. We're a highly vaccinated community. For most of us, we understand that those risks, that it's still more important to get vaccinated, to protect ourselves and each other. That this isn't, for most of us, this isn't a choice to make as an individual. This is a choice that we have to make as communities. And, but it's, when I remember all of those things, and that drug companies can't always be trusted, that's true. And there's lots of evidence about that as well. So, I can have some compassion for people who those fears are being preyed upon by other people. So yeah, we can't let our commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of every person be contingent upon them being people that we like and agree with, or else that's not really a principle. But that doesn't mean that that's easy. As if it were easy to do that, we wouldn't have it as a principle. It is hard spiritual work to continue to see the inherent worth and dignity of people that we disagree with, and who we even feel that their actions are threatening our lives. Inherent worth and dignity doesn't mean we agree. It means, we don't think that human beings should be, chained up and, treated like animals and those kinds of things. So I hope that's helpful. I know there's no pat answer to, these are the big religious questions of our times. So I'm glad you're wrestling with that, and you'll continue to wrestle with that. Okay, so I'm going to skip Marshall's question about the eighth principle and say we will definitely have sermons about the eighth principle this year. And if you're thinking, what's the eighth principle? Because we have 7 principles. That's what the question is about. Should Unitarian Universalists adopt an 8th principle? So we'll definitely be learning more about this year. Do we have a plan for returning to in-person service? I mean, so in April's newsletter, I shared that we're hoping to be back together in September. So we're continuing on that timeline. But in terms of like a specific plan, we don't have anything that concrete because things are still changing. And that's, of course, been the challenge of the whole pandemic. But and not just that things are still changing, but we have to figure out the technology. I know that's a frustrating answer when we're sitting on technology in the first place, but when we yearn to be back together, and many of you feel safe and like you would be in that chapel this moment if we opened the doors. But we know that no matter what is happening, that there will be people who, for their own safety, choose not to come into the chapel. And so we want worship to be just as accessible using technology as it is right now. We want it to be this accessible when we are also have worship in the chapel together. And that's the piece we have to figure out. It's not going to be like before where we just recorded the sermon and posted it online. We want people to be able to share joys and sorrows with each other and, you know, feel like they're part of the worship all happening together. So that is really the challenge. There's a team of folks working on that. Steve Schlesinger, Tom Karlstrom, Richard Quartz, I know are on that team. I know they'd love to have more help. So if you would like to help figure out that technology puzzle and help us move along, I know that those folks would welcome that. I love coming to church every Sunday and seeing everyone here too. Oh, thank you so much. I love that. Wonderful. Is it true that some of our founding fathers were Unitarians, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, etc.? Yes, that is true. The person we can most claim as a Unitarian is John Adams. John Adams and his son and his wife are buried at a Unitarian church. They attended. Ben Franklin was absolutely not a Unitarian. I forget what his religious faith was. Thomas Jefferson is more like a sort of a classic modern story. How do you know if someone's a Unitarian? So there was no Unitarian church where Thomas Jefferson lived, but he attended Unitarian church when he was in Boston and places where there was a church to attend, and famously said he thought that every thinking man would be a Unitarian within the next 10 or 20 years or within a generation or something like that. So he was wrong about that. But yes, we absolutely claim some of those early folks as Unitarians. How can we keep hope for this world when so many bad things are happening, especially the recent flooding illustrating worsening climate change? How do we keep hope in hard times is again, one of the deep religious questions of our times. I think what part of the practical answer is that we have to feed ourselves stories of hope, right? When we're informed and we're reading news, the news is, necessarily bad. And now we can receive bad news from all around the world in real time. And we can see videos where bad things are happening all of the time. It goes back to that Mr. Rogers teaching, right? Look for the helpers, look for the people who are coming in. I think that's the place to find hope. We just had yesterday, I'm a Padres fan, and at the Padres game in Washington, D.C., they heard shots. And it turns out the shots were outside the stadium, but stadiums are echoey and they didn't know where the shots were coming from. So the game stopped and people started to flee, not knowing what was happening and where to go. So we could focus on that and talk about gun control and how many more times do we have to have these shootings. And we should talk about those things from a justice issue and a policy change issue. And the story that has me moved to tears this morning is that some of our, the baseball teams went to their dugouts, and behind their dugouts are their locker rooms and things. But Padres players came out and went and opened the gates to where fans were sitting and escorted fans into the dugout to a place that felt safer. And so, we have to seek out those stories of look what humans do in the most frightening moment of thinking that there may be a shooting in the place that you are at, to run out of a place of safety, to open a gate for other people to come to a place of safety. Like, humans are capable of so much love and caring for each other. And we have to find those stories and nourish ourselves with them, because the news is always going to tell us the worst. So, there's wonderful things happening with people trying to make changes in climate change and all those kinds of things. So this has been wonderful. I'm going to move us through some of the rest of the service because we're already coming up on 11. And there's room. I left room in the rest of the service to answer some more questions. So I'm going to look at the questions, but also let's be mindful of the time. So thank you for the questions that have been asked so far. And I'm going to invite us to sing together. The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. Today is a social justice Sunday when we donate our offering to a local organization that makes a difference in our larger community. This Sunday, we are taking a special collection for an organization called Just in Time for Foster Youth. Here is more about them.
I was in foster care beginning from when I was about 2 months old all the way until I aged out from 18.
I was in foster care for 12 years.
I was in foster care for approximately 5 years.
From birth until 5, and then from 14 until the age of aging out at 18.
I would say the biggest challenge was the foster care families. You kind of expected them to take you in as their own, and you kind of just were a burden on them.
Coming out of foster care for me was pretty difficult. I was in school, I was a full-time student, and I was working part-time.
When you move out, you have to pay bills. Never paid a bill in my life, so I would say the biggest challenge was just independence. You have to learn how to do everything by yourself.
There were times where I needed food or car repairs. Didn't have anyone to turn to, just help me, and Just in Time was there for me.
I was matched up with someone that was in a position of what I may have wanted to do after I graduated college, and you go to a luncheon and you meet with your career coach, and Annie wasn't it, and I remember we just connected on a very personal level. It was more than just meeting someone that was gonna help me in my career or help me save money. I've stayed connected with her ever since leaving Just in Time. She's actually my kid's godmom.
It was one of those feelings where it's like there's people who actually really care about me, who want to help me succeed. To meet someone from an organization I had never been connected with, to come in and say, I want to actually help you be ready and successful for school.
Just in Time is one of the biggest resources. They were monumental to me. I had a problem with an old beater that my sister had hand me down, and I was trying to get to college, and it was the only thing that was stopping me. So I remember the first thing was Just in Time stepping up and getting me an alternator. It was probably around 60 to 80 bucks, but it had much more value to me than that. It enabled me to continue to chase my dreams and to try to pursue growth and kind of increase my capacity in this world, especially in a time where I was struggling to do so.
From 20 until now, I'm 31 now, and Diane's still in my life. Even in my master's program, she was always there to kind of support me and give me that positive reinforcement that I can do it.
I would say the biggest impact Just in Time has made on my life is by them helping me, it made me want to give back and help others as well.
Coming where I'm coming from, I think I remember a statistic back when I was doing my undergrad, and it was like 2% of former foster youth or underprivileged youth get a bachelor's degree. And for me to be sitting here and having a master's, I think that I take a lot of pride in that. Independence
Comes with having someone that can kind of prop you up, and Just in Time was that someone. Even though I haven't been in the programs for 6+ years, I'm still around because those connections.
There are so many different facets and so many different people that are available to help you and to really enable you to thrive.
I'm Shantae Battle. I have a master's in public administration. I'm a great mom to a 5-year-old boy who loves dinosaurs.
My name is Andres Lamone. I'm a proud father of 3 beautiful kids, currently the shop foreman at my custom fabrication shop.
I am Veronica Radford. I'm a college graduate of Cal State San Marcos. I'm a wife of 6 years, a mother of 2, and a business owner.
My name is Justin Anastasia. I'm a proud father of a 13-year-old beautiful and intelligent daughter. I have 3 degrees, an AA in social work, a BS in microbiology, and an MSHS in regulatory affairs. And I am the lasting impact of Just in Time.
And I am a part of the lasting impact of Just in Time.
I'm the lasting impact of Just in Time.
And I am part of the lasting impact of Just in Time.
So there are 2 ways to donate. You can make a donation directly to Just in Time for Foster Youth. I'll put this link in the chat box. And so when you do that, they have your name and you can get on their mailing list. They can thank you directly and you can learn more about their organization. If you prefer for them not to have your name, you can text your donation to Chalice and we will forward the donations as coming from the congregation. So to indicate your donation is for this special offering, please text your dollar amount and the word justice, because this is a social justice collection. If your Sunday donation isn't meant to be part of the justice donation, but is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And please be sure you're using our new phone number for text giving, which starts with area code 760. I hope you will give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. As Unitarian Universalists, we gather to affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Okay, I'm going to take advantage of this format and answer the last 5 questions, and know that if you need to go, that's okay. And this recording will be on YouTube and you could watch the end of it later. And yeah, but these are good questions and I wanted to get to them. So a question, can you talk a little bit about how to separate art, literature from the flawed people that create them, or should they be separated? So for thousands of years, we did not separate, for the most part, art and literature from the flawed people that created them. And I think right now we're in a period for many of us where there's ultra awareness and analysis of who created art or literature, who's speaking, what's our point of view. It's like postmodernism and context, this pendulum has swung way to this side. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just a time of experimenting with doing things a different way. And that, my experience is that pendulums do swing around and then fall into more of a center. We can all think of art and literature we enjoy who the creator makes us uncomfortable for whatever reason. For me, it's songs by Michael Jackson. And I've been like at weddings where there's suddenly a Michael Jackson song, and those songs are enjoyable. And I believe he was a pedophile who really hurt people. So wrestling with that is appropriate. I think just ignoring it isn't the answer. So I don't have a simple answer for it, but I want to make my choice, and my invitation is to think of the people whose art and literature wasn't lifted up in favor of mostly white people. Whose art and literature do we not know about? Did we not learn about? We didn't grow up reading? And to use these times as an invitation to go back and find the music we missed, the books we didn't read, in favor of these other folks. And I think that's probably ultimately, the answer, if there's an answer, that if we know we're doing better about lifting up all good, interesting, juicy art and literature, then we probably will feel less anxious about, who are the people who produced it, and do we approve of them or disapprove of them? So I think we just need, sort of richer and more diverse resources across the board, and then we'll feel less anxious about some of these questions. That's my guess. How did you get into ministry? I'm always happy to talk about that. I'll try not to make it too long an answer. The short answer is, like, I loved church. I was attending UU church, and I loved church. I was a leader of the pagan group at my UU church. And then it coincided with, I was working at my family's construction company, and we made the decision to close. And I like to think that I would have answered my call to ministry even if that hadn't have happened. But to be honest, it takes a lot to start to picture your life differently. And I was really pictured myself long-term at the company and having a higher level of management. And it would have taken a lot to leave. So the decision to close the company really started me thinking, like, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to stay in construction at a different company? And for me, the joy was really always working with my family and the pride that we got in building things together. And so that opened the door to thinking of doing something different. So I was, if you don't know, my home church was First UU congregation down in San Diego. So I'm born in San Diego and raised here. And so it was at their women's retreat, and I was leading a workshop, and I just, I loved what I was doing. And I thought, what if this was my job? And I came home from that retreat and told my husband, Peter, I think I would like to go to seminary. So that started it off. So the answer was volunteering at church. I hope you hear how important it is to volunteer at church over and over again this morning. Okay, big question. Regard to evil, what is the UU take on this? Is there an overarching belief about what evil is, where it comes from, or if people can be inherently evil? These are big questions. I have at least 2 sermons, and I started preaching a lot more on evil the last 3 or 4 years. What do you know? But the shorter answer is we don't we don't tend to believe in evil as a supernatural force, as an otherworldly force, that evil is human created. And to me, pretty important is to know that we are all capable of good or evil. And it's part of our human condition to make choices and, to choose. And I think we get into danger when we think like, oh, I could never do that horrible thing someone is doing. We don't have to believe ourselves capable of, the worst things in life, but conditions push people into terrible behavior and action. And I think we have to see that as human, not other, capital O. So I'm happy to send the asker of this to some of my sermons on that topic, where I wrestle more deeply and not go into 40 minutes of that now. And now, of course, the question I can't resist: will the Padres win the World Series? What's wonderful about sports is how you don't know, right? We don't know. It's not inevitable. You can't just look at statistics and say, here's the best team or here's who will win. There's so much human part of it. Will they be playing their best or playing their worst? It's hard for me to picture the Padres winning the World Series this year because our pitching staff is really struggling. We have lots of people on the injured list. Like, honestly, before the All-Star break, I was really feeling like, I don't know what down on the Padres means to me right now, because I still watch every game and love my team, but really felt like, well, this isn't our year. And then, just in the two game and a half since we've been back, we scored 24 runs in our first game after the All-Star break. So it reminded all of us how great our team can play when we're playing well. So it would be a wonderful underdog story. I know the Padres aren't pictured as an underdog this year because we do have a really strong team, but we don't have many pitchers who can make it past the fifth inning right now. And it's hard to imagine how you're going to win the World Series with a pitching staff that you don't have any starting pitchers who can go very long. So, but I definitely think we're on the way to building a World Series winning team. And it's a very fun team to watch, whatever's happening. We're making a lot of history this year. We've had a no-hitter, just had a player hit for the cycle Friday night. So that's what when I do pray for my Padres, but what I pray is for the games to be fun and for the players to be healthy. I don't think I've prayed for us to win the World Series. So those were the last answers to the last rounds of questions. And I thank you for bringing your questions, and just in general for all the love and support of this congregation, these hard times, the feeling of coming out of the pandemic, even though we're not quite there, leads to, I know we're all doing a lot of reflecting and some of the questions about what have we learned. And I have felt very loved by this congregation this whole year. And I hope you have felt love from me. I really feel like we helped each other get through some really hard times. So love to you, and look forward to hopefully being back together within the next couple of months and being in that chapel space together. You're invited to join in singing one of our favorites.
Below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue old home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea,
Our closing words come from Reverend Annie Forster. As far as our love flows, as far as our hope grows, as far as our yearning goes, we are no farther one from another. Go in peace, go with love. May it be so. You're invited to close our time together by singing The Well, and everyone is invited to coffee hour.